How would you explain why XRP will be a more lucrative investment than owning Ripple? See you in Austin next time. Awesome, dude. So it's really just discrepancy in what the current valuation of the asset versus a company would be. So a couple different things. Ripple itself is significantly more valuable than XRP is to the marketplace today. So those that have invested in Ripple early have outsized returns. Well, I say that if you got in XRP at 0.03 of a penny, let's do some math here. I've got my calculator, handy dandy calculator, my Blue's Clues calculator. I don't know, my phone's starting. Here it goes. Come on, there it is, calculator. All right, so the seed round for Ripple was like 49 cents per share. They just did a tender offer at $300 a share. So what is that? 300. If you were on, preferred A stock that people got in those early days, we're going to divide that by 0.49. So that's a 612x on your money if you owned Ripple from the beginning to now. What about XRP? If you had XRP at 0.03 of a penny, and now it's $1.30, so we're going to divide $1.30 divided by 0.03 of a penny, that would be a 433x on your money. So as of today, Ripple, the early investment in Ripple has outpaced the early investment in XRP. Now, that's at the tender offer price. The actual price that the shares will trade at on the open market is probably a pretty close representation of the appreciation on XRP itself. Now, there have been other points in history where XRP has outpaced the appreciation on Ripple shares. When we saw the run-up in 2017, 2018, you probably would have been better off to own XRP than you would Ripple shares. As of today, because we've seen the bear market that's happened and Ripple continue to do well, Ripple is to the upside. So at different points in time, I would argue that it's probably better to hold one or the other. Over the long term, the argument that I would make for XRP being a better investment than Ripple would be the network effect, because it's a protocol. It's not capped per capita or income of the company, or an evaluation off of EBITDA or cash flows or assets. It is literally the volume and scale of the network that will cause the price to continue to appreciate and grow over time. Now, Ripple holds an escrow of XRP, and they use that token directly in order to facilitate their business at scale. So Ripple is a proxy of XRP, just like a DAT would be. And Brad's even in shareholder emails talked about the valuation of the company if they were to use the DAT ratios that MicroStrategy and BitMine and some of these other DAT companies have used, and it was substantially higher, like $600-700 million or $1 billion valuation. But that's with them controlling the full escrow. We know that the Clarity Act, when it passes, they're going to have to reduce their allocation or their total ownership of the token to less than 20% over the next year or 12 months. It's going to be difficult to do as the escrow is controlled by Ripple, and they do have multiple wallets that they could divest or give to other counterparties. I think that they have a plan in place to be able to do that. But all that being said, Ripple's always going to be a proxy for XRP. Ripple shares are never going to be tier 1 collateral. You're never going to be able to get 90 or 100% margin against your Ripple shares. You're not going to be able to use those to back ETF or derivatives. Now, will it trade at a multiple of NAV? It's possible. I would say our company, Digital Ascension Group, is probably a levered play on XRP also, right? So, if you wanted a levered play on XRP, I think Evernorth is probably a better proxy for, you know, getting a 1.2 or 1.5 MNAV versus Ripple, just because, you know, Ripple does hold that on their books, but they're going to have to divest a large portion of the XRP that they currently own over time in order to be compliant. So I think they're both good. I have an allocation to both, and we've done a lot of deals in the mastermind over the years for Ripple equity. I can talk about that because those are closed. But you know, all that being said, I think that both are great opportunities. They'll probably track pretty close, but at different points in time. You know, I think in the short term, as we see the adoption of this network and protocol and the asset itself, it's probably going to outpace Ripple, and then Ripple will probably catch up, and then, you know, it'll go back and forth over time. So if you were trading it, like if you were trying to track the price of Ripple shares versus XRP, and there was a chart that correlated that, you would see what the mean was, and you would see when it was more beneficial to hold XRP or Ripple equity, depending on where you were on the chart. I know that's a hard, like, think about, you know, real estate priced in gold versus dollars, and when it would be better to hold real estate or when it would be better to hold gold for, you know, the peaks and troughs on that chart. Very similar to like XRP versus Ripple equity.